Hello, Riff Raff, Riffites, Riffologists, wherever you're riffing, however you're riffing. We are honored that you hit play on this recording, or even if you accidentally are sitting on your phone and it started playing. Hello from down here. Hey, today is a special episode. We recently had a masterclass on Israeli culture, Bible history with Opher Rom, and we're excited to be able to share that with you. And so if you prefer to watch this and you're currently listening, we'll have this on YouTube as well. But this is going to be a great opportunity. We're going to take the next 40 minutes or so. We're going to walk through some history, some culture of not only Bible, but of Israel. Our hope is that as we lean into the context of Scripture, it allows us to understand how we can best apply it in our own setting. So thanks for tuning in. I think you're going to love Opher's conversation today. So welcome to another Riff episode, and let's go for it.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. It's great to be in the United States again. I used to live here for 5 years when I was very young, Philadelphia. That's where my English is from, so forgive the accent. The rest of my life was spent in Israel, and believe it or not, I actually failed completely history in high school. It was a social gathering for friends with interruptions for classes as far as I was concerned. But it's very interesting to see what you like to study when you're not forced to study it. And after serving in the military, which is a requirement in Israel for 3 years if you're a man and 2 years if you're a woman, then you go out and you travel the world, and I figured traveling is a lot of fun. Why not get paid for it? So I'm getting paid to travel, basically. And when my parents saw me at the age of 23 doing nothing, sitting at home watching TV, they told me to get off of and do something. And that's when I started learning about Israel. I really knew nothing about this country. And it turns out that not only do I like the country, I love studying history and more so religion. And one of the religions that actually the only one that begins in Israel, is Christianity. This is where Jesus was born. This is where the miracles take place. This is where he walks on water. This is where really almost the entire setting of Jesus' life and the disciples is going to be. So when you come to Israel, you are turning this black and white book into color. You are hearing with your eyes. I know that sounds a little bit weird, but everything that you read or everything that you were told and all the stories that you heard about the Bible, you're looking at the country and it resonates in your mind. The words just come to you without even realizing it. It is a miracle. And prophecies are coming true there. It's unbelievable, really is. And now the question is always, why Israel? You know, this is a tiny piece of real estate in the world. But just like in modern day, is the real estate goes up because of what? 3 words. You're a real estate agent, are you? Location, location, location. Israel, that land is right in the middle of everything. It is the land in between. If you wanted to go from Africa to Europe, you had to go through the land of Israel. You have to go from Africa to Asia and backwards. The main highways of the ancient world went through this land. The number 1 highway is called the Via Maris, the way of the sea, goes through this land. The number 2 highway of the ancient world goes through this land. And for better and for worse, you know, the best technologies making their way in and out of Egypt, or the wars that the Egyptians would fight, everything takes place in this little piece of territory. Anywhere you throw a stone in Israel, you find something. Nowadays, what happens is we can't build a thing. We have a law in Israel. You cannot build anything until you do an archaeological dig. Because sometimes you find something so important to somebody out there that all of your building plans are going to change. It could be a 2,000-year-old church, which we assume we just found under an area that they wanted to expand the prison over into. That is going to change everything we know about early churches, because we found a 1st century cross in a mosaic which predates the earliest churches by about 200 years. So it's insane what we find in different places. And it doesn't have to be the main places. Usually you find stuff in Jerusalem. That's a 5,000-year-old city. Jaffa, 4,000-year-olds. Tiberias, 2,000 years old. And it keeps going and going and going. And one of the things we love to do is share not just the history, but what it was like back in those days. Now, to give you an understanding a little bit of what Israel looks like, we're going to ask Jeremy to come back up here. I don't know why he ran away. Maybe he knew this was coming. And we're going to make my friend Jeremy here the map of Israel. You will never forget what Israel looks like, because this is so hilarious that you need your cameras ready right now. All right, you ready? Now I'm going to leave him and see if he's got good balance, if he remembers ballet class from a few years ago. Not bad, not bad.
Core strength.
Yes, or core strength. All right.
Yeah, there we go.
Much better. Now, bend this a little bit. There we go. Finger up like that.
Which finger? Which finger?
That finger.
Okay.
Yeah. And this one goes like a little teapot. There we go. So, this is the area of Jaffa. It's really the only natural port that Israel has for 4,000 years. Now, this is Haifa Bay. This is the finger of the Galilee, the Golan Heights. Some people know this word, the words Golan Heights. It's a region in the northeastern section. His armpit is going to be the Sea of Galilee. Now, when we say a sea, you have to kind of understand everything is relative in life. For you, it would be like a pond. And this little sea here is the lowest freshwater source in the world. And that's where Jesus is going to walk on waters, for example, and Peter is going to join him.
Oh,
We're not done.
Okay. Jeremy Meyer.
Down here, this is the Jordan River. This is the modern-day Gaza Strip. Very smooth, by the way.
A lot of earthquakes there.
Everybody know the story of Mount Carmel? If you don't know, we're talking about Elijah defeating the prophets of Baal in the book of Kings, chapter 18. The Carmel Mountains are over here, and thank God he's not a woman right now. We're not going to point to Beersheba, though, because he's a man, so that's a different issue. And throughout this wonderful land that we have here, what would you say the belly button? Put that stomach out. Jerusalem's on a mountain. There we go. There we go. You can put your foot down if it's easier. All right. So his belly button is actually the city of Jerusalem. And it is right in the center of the land of Israel, which is in the center of the world. And that's why we call it the belly button of the world. And that little city, thank you, hold on for a second. That little city controls one of the most important junctions in the entire ancient world. It controls the path that leads from the number one highway, which goes down this side, along the Mediterranean Sea over here. You can see it in the back. See the Mediterranean Sea on the western side of the land of Israel? And it connects to the number two. So if you want to go from the number two to the number one, or one to two, you had to go through the city of Jerusalem. And if you control the junction, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
That was it. What a great model. So if you control that city, you control who goes through, who doesn't go through. And if they're going through, what's the most important thing in the world? You get to say how much they're going to pay you. Taxes. It's all about the money. Back then, as it is today. Jerusalem is probably the most conquered piece of territory on the face of the earth today. Because if you control the roads, you control the world. That's the idea. And that's why at least 30, 40 different empires come to the land of Israel, and they want to control the routes. They want to control the number one, number two highways of the ancient world. They need to control the junctions. I'm sure that you've heard of places like Armageddon. Yes? Armageddon is a place in Israel, a little city probably called Megiddo. There are other theories as to where it was, but that's one of the traditions. And Megiddo is again on one of those junctions that controls the number one highway. When we talk about King Solomon, he's going to build the city of Jerusalem, he's going to build the temple, he's going to build the walls around the city, and then it lists three very important cities that he also is going to build. Chatzor, Megiddo, what I just mentioned kind of as Armageddon, and Gezer. So we're mentioning these places because of their importance. And all of these different empires are going to conquer. We're not going to go through the entire history. That's what I do in Israel. And we go from Genesis, book 1, verse 1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth was void and without form, and the Spirit of God is hovering over that void, and so on and so forth. And then we just keep going, the stories of the Bible, and we see how the Egyptians and the Canaanites and the Assyrians and the Babylonians and then the Persians, and after the Persians come the Greeks. And there was a question here in the trivia game, what is the common language back in those days? And Greek becomes the international language. Alexander the Great conquers almost half of the known world back in those days, and Greek culture starts penetrating all of these places that the Greeks are going to conquer. Now, there's a little period of time that the Jews rebel against the Greeks. They kick them out of the land, but that language stays with them. So while the Jews between themselves might speak Hebrew, Greek is the international language. And then the Romans come along, and now we're getting to the time of Jesus. Almost. The Romans are going to enter this area of the land of Israel around 2,000 years ago, just a little bit more than that. And they bring with them the Roman world. And the way that the Romans ruled was very interesting. They would conquer territories of land with their army, probably the greatest army to walk the earth. But they would conquer the people of that territory with their culture. The Romans truly believed that they have the elite culture. And if you just give them a chance, you would want to be a part of this culture. They're going to show you their culture by building these great buildings like a theater and an amphitheater. These are two different structures, by the way. A theater is half a circle of seats with a stage in front of it. This is where we have the shows. This is where we have the dramas. This is where we portray our culture to you. People don't read and write 2,000 years ago. So if I conquer this area and I want to teach you about my gods, I need to act it out for you. And I'm going to pay you as the governor of the city an entire day's work fee. So you don't work and you come into the theater and you sit there all day long during the day because we need the light, we don't have electricity. And you're going to watch those shows. And this is how we get you, warmed up to our culture. We pay you, you go into this incredible structure, and then we present everything in a way that you can understand, actors on stage. So that's the theater. What's an amphitheater? An amphitheater is two theaters. The word amphi simply means two. So instead of a half circle, we have a full circle of seats. Anybody here ever visit Rome? You have the Colosseum. You heard about it. You saw it in the movies. Maybe somebody saw Gladiator, the movie. Gladiator takes place in an amphitheater. And that's where we see the blood sports, people against people, gladiators versus gladiators, against animals, everybody against everybody. The more blood, the better, basically. And we have a lot of other structures that no one in their lives has ever seen until the Romans came in. And the Romans thought that when they conquer the land of Israel, it's going to be the exact same thing. It'll take a little bit of time, but the Jews will warm up to the Romans, understand that the Roman culture is a better culture. They'll want to be a part of it. And things will be quiet like they were all over the Roman world. It was actually known as the Roman peace. Because once people accepted the Roman culture, they were a part of it. And the Jews simply refused to accept the Roman culture. And the more that Romans tried to enforce their way on the Jews, the more the Jews rebelled against the Romans. And the more the Jews rebelled against the Romans did what they knew best. Try and enforce their way on these, pardon my French, idiots that don't understand that my culture is better than yours. And once you give it a try, you'll want to be a part of my culture. So this is a time frame where there is a lot of defiance. There's a lot of resentment. The Jews already pay a lot of taxes. They go to the temple, 10% of their earnings goes to the temple. If you're a farmer and you have livestock, 10% of the livestock goes to the temple. We got to give it to God. If you have, you're growing fruits, 10% of the fruits of your trees goes to the temple. Aside from that, there is a tax which is paid once a year to kind of count the Jewish people. It's called a half shekel coin. And no matter where you are around the world, once a year, if you're 20 years of age or up, you need to pay that tax. How does that happen? I mean, I live in the United States. How am I going to come to Israel? It's a 6 months journey. Another 6 months to get back, right? I'm not going to do this every single year just to get the taxes. So what do? We send messengers from the temple all over the Jewish world, and they will collect the taxes 3 times a year. There was another question here. How many times a year are Jews commanded to come and see the temple, right? And who was it somewhere over there that said 3? Right over there. Yes. Hello. Yes, 3 times a year Jews are commanded to see the temple. However, it usually is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It's a pilgrimage. Just like modern day times, it costs to travel. If you're going from Greece to Israel, 2-3 months of walking, 2-3 months back, during these 6 months that you're traveling, there's no way you're going to see the temple twice, right? And then you have to what? Do this all year long? Just keep on traveling? It doesn't make sense. So this is going to be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Your community is going to help you fund this trip. So we have this constant movement of Jews from all over the world making their way to Jerusalem, making their way back from Jerusalem. So you, sir, what's your name? Chris, you're going to come for Passover. And you're from the same community I'm going to assume for right now. You're going to come for, let's call it Pentecost, and you're going to come for Tabernacles. And the 3 of you over here, you're going to do it from your community, and you from your community, and you from your community. And by the time you finish Passover, you start making your way back, he's on his way too. And you're on your way back, you're on your way too. So we always have somebody from the community making his way to Jerusalem, making his way back from Jerusalem. What happens on Pentecost 2,000 years ago when you're there? Jesus is going to die and be resurrected. Now, you might not have seen it, but trust me, if you were in Jerusalem during Passover and you heard about this guy that may or may not have been resurrected, you're going to pass that along. And when you get back to your community, where do you live? Where? Baldwin? Bolivar. Okay, so you're from Bolivar. It'll take you 6 months to get back. What are you going to do? You want to tell everybody about your experiences. They helped you. Your community helped you come here to Jerusalem, right? So you want to share with them everything that happened, how you gave the sacrifice on behalf of your community, and when the priest raised his hand and the smoke went straight up, even though it was raining and storming. That's one of the miracles associated with the temple back in those days. It was unbelievable. You know, you saw the temple, one of the greatest buildings to have been built back in those days. The Romans came as tourists just to see the buildings of King Herod. If you've never seen King Herod buildings, you've never seen them in your life. And then you're going to come to your community and you're going to gather them all in the house of gathering. Anybody here heard of the word synagogue? A synagogue, literally in Hebrew, Beit Knesset, house of gathering. And you would gather your community and you would tell them about the 6 months that you, or the 8 months or the 10 months that you traveled and all of the crazy things that you saw. And you're going to tell them, and I heard about this guy who may or may not have been resurrected during that pilgrimage that I did. And just like that, your entire community in Bolivar knows. And you came from Ethiopia, and you came from France, and you came from Spain, and you came from, where do you want to be from? Japan is good? Let's go with Japan. And in a matter of about 6 months, everybody around the Jewish world suddenly hears the name Jesus. Whether you believe it or not, it doesn't matter. This is how we spread the name of Jesus. And we said that your friend from Bolivar, right? You're coming in for Pentecost. 7 weeks after the Jewish holiday of Passover, we have another pilgrimage holiday. And now, what's your name? Ron? Ron is here for Pentecost. And what happens in Pentecost 7 weeks after Jesus was or wasn't resurrected? The disciples have the Holy Spirit come down on them and they speak in tongues. How incredible is that? Now we have you from Ethiopia and you from Japan and you from Bolivar and you from, I don't know where we said, France or wherever it is. And these 11 disciples, these 11 fishermen from the Galilee of Israel are speaking in your language. It takes you 6 months to get back to Bolivar. You tell them all about your experience and then you mention, and you know what happened? You know, when Chris came back, he told you about this guy who may or may not have been resurrected. Well, I just heard his disciples speaking in my language. And these are 2 incredible miracles taking place in Jerusalem on the pilgrimage holidays of the Jewish people. And just like that, in less than a year, everybody here, all of these different communities from different places around the world have heard about 2 Amazing miracles associated with this same person. Now, again, I'm not saying this is how people start believing in Jesus, but this is how word spreads. This is better than Twitter. Okay, this is better than Facebook. It's better than Fox News or ABC News or whatever people are watching around here. This is someone from your community that came to the land of Israel on behalf of the community and is telling you about your experience. You are definitely more likely to believe you're a member of the community than you are some news reporter that you've never heard of in your life, talking from not on scene, but with a green screen with the map of Israel or whatever it is behind us. But that's the way it is. Okay, so that's the culture. This is also the way that Peter and Paul later are going to present all of these things. If you see the path that Paul does, the 7 churches in Turkey, for those of you who are going to visit Turkey at any point in your lives, it's all around the Roman world. It's all around the traditions, the culture that they had back in those days. Now, somebody here answered about Aramaic. This is a language that is used by the Jewish people, but it's not the main language. The main language between the Jews is Hebrew. Okay, here and there they speak Aramaic as well. It was a language that was known. The international language, that was Greek. And where does Latin come in? Because that was also one of the options that he gave you in the trivia question. That's the language of the Romans. And when the Romans wanted to communicate between themselves with almost no one else understanding what they're talking about, then they would communicate in Latin. We find the Latin inscription in the area of Caesarea. Okay, if you remember the map that Jeremy did, Caesarea is right around here on the Mediterranean Sea. It was the largest man-made port built in the world by King Herod the Great. And right there is where Pontius Pilate is going to be. Now you say, well, Pontius Pilate is going to sentence Jesus in Jerusalem. That's what the Bible says. Yes. But he actually lives in the Roman capital. We have, as I told you, there is a constant battle between the Jewish culture and the Roman culture. And while Jerusalem is the capital for the Jews, Caesarea becomes the capital for the Romans. And the seat of the governor of the Romans is in Caesarea. So what is he doing in Jerusalem? Everybody heard about the Macy's parade? Or like a big event that you have somewhere around here? I'm telling you that during the Macy's parade, the chief of the police is not sitting at home on a recliner watching everything on TV. He's on the ground. He's making sure everything goes smoothly. And that's exactly what happens during the pilgrimage days. Jerusalem is one of the largest cities in the entire world. Let's go with about anywhere between the number 1 to number 5 largest cities, right up there with Rome, Athens, Alexandria in Egypt, for example. We have at least 150,000 people living there. 2,000 years ago, that's a lot of people. During the pilgrimage holidays, if I'm as minimal as I can, with communities from all over the Jewish world making their way to Jerusalem, let's just double that number, 300,000. We have 300,000 people coming into Jerusalem. This is already a culture, the Jews. It's a culture that doesn't want the Romans in this area, right? We don't want a simple soldier provoking the Jews into rebellion. We have enough problems without the provocations. We need the chief of the police there. And Pontius Pilate is basically a military appointee by the Romans whose sole job is to make sure nobody shakes the tree. So when they tell Pontius Pilate, this guy is a troublemaker, this guy is going to cause problems, he doesn't want any problems. And eventually he's going to sentence Jesus to death. Now, as I told you, I've been talking about this from the beginning. There is a constant battle between the Jews and the Romans. We have small rebellions going on all the time during that period of time. And when the Jews are 80% taxed, imagine 80% of your salary. I guess it's not that far-fetched because that's almost what's going on right now where I live and probably where you live. But 80% of your salary goes to taxes. In the Jewish world, we're praying for somebody to get us out of this miserable existence. And that someone is what we call a Messiah. The Messiah in the Jewish world is a military leader. He is there to get us out of the yoke of the Romans and usher in the kingdom of heaven. How many times do you read in the Bible, when you read in the Bible, that John is preparing everybody for the kingdom of heaven? Jesus is setting the way to the kingdom of heaven. You will come into the kingdom of heaven if you do this, or whatever it is that Jesus is going to teach his disciples. And if we're bringing in the kingdom of heaven, we first have to oust the kingdom of the Romans. This is not turn the other cheek in terms of be paciful. Turn the other cheek has many different meanings. And in the Roman world, Jeremy, I'm going to need you again. This is when I get to slap Jeremy, all right? And not just any slap, because how many of us are left-handed here? Anyone left-handed? Like very sporadic, right? The majority of us are right-handed. Now the Bible says that, well, Jesus says, if somebody slaps you on the right cheek. Now if I'm right-handed and I come to Jeremy and I slap him, which cheek is this one?
Left.
It's his left cheek. That means that for most of us to slap him on the right cheek, I have to do a backhanded slap. Ooh, nice. You did that right on time. Exactly. Now we just need the... Anyway, when I slap him on the right cheek, I'm basically showing him, you don't even deserve me slapping you the right way. You're not my equal. And then what does Jesus say? If somebody slaps you on the right cheek, turn the other cheek. Now, once he does that, he's basically taunting me as the Roman soldier to hit him again. And this does two things. First of all, if I slap him, I'm going to look at him as an equal. Okay? That's number one. Or he's showing me that he thinks he's my equal, which taunts me even more. But more than that, and this is where Roman military law comes to play. If I come up to any of you in the street as a Roman soldier, I have the right to slap you once. Doesn't matter why. You don't have to do anything. You know what? I just want to slap Jeremy. How many of you want to slap Jeremy sometimes? I saw a few hands there. It's
a Pentecostal church.
All right, thank you. We're not going to slap you. Okay, thanks. Yes. So I have the right to slap him once. So if he taunts me and I actually decide to slap him again, I get into trouble. This is a way of getting the Roman soldier into trouble. When Jesus says, if somebody asks you to walk a mile in his shoes or take his belongings for a mile, what are you supposed to do? Walk 2 miles. Because again, the Roman soldier is allowed to tell you, please, not please, no please. Take my stuff, even if it's the wrong way for you. You're headed that way, I want you to walk that way. And you're going to help me out for 1 mile. Walk 2 miles. Because if you walk 2 miles, now I get in trouble again. I only have the right to force you to walk 1 mile for me. So Jesus is basically using Roman law in order to show the Jews how to defy the Romans, how to make them not want to be here. We want you out of here. And he's not telling people to pick up stones and start throwing it at the Roman soldiers. Obviously, he knows that the Romans are too strong maybe. But he is showing us how to defy the Romans. He's showing us a different way. And that's one of the most important things in Judaism. Not just defying the Romans, but to always look for a different way. Judaism until today is looking for a different way. We're always trying to find the right way of reading the text. And you might say, what do you mean a right way of reading the text? I mean, the text is right there. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth is void. But in Judaism, there is an infinite way of reading the text. We're going to read the exact same words in 1,000 different ways. And this is something that is usually overlooked because today when we read the Bible, it's very clear to us. You go to Genesis book 4, verse 3, and you read the text, right? Great. Let me ask you a question. Or I'll just use 3 English words. It's a lot easier. Let's eat grandpa. What's missing? What? A comma. Punctuation. Ancient Jewish script has no punctuation. We added that in to make our lives easier. And this is a common standard in the Christian world. It's also a common standard if you look in most modern day Jewish texts, you'll see it. But if you go to the rabbinical world where they're studying the text, you'll see that they're using the text without punctuation. They don't have a division into chapters. They don't have a division into verses at all. And that means when a rabbi 2,000 years ago looks at the text, he sees paragraphs. We do have paragraphs in the text, but that's it. And then when I look at the paragraph as a rabbi, I'm allowed to read it any way that I want. I'm going to start here, end here, and put the comma after the fourth word. And you have heard it say, but I say unto you. Jesus says this oftentimes. The people are coming to him. They have questions. And he basically tells them, you've heard Rabbi Chris say that this is how I interpret it. This is how I read the text. But I'm telling you that if you take the comma one word after where Rabbi Chris says, and take another two words after that, it changes the entire meaning of the text. Suddenly, instead of let's eat grandpa, it's let's eat grandpa, which makes obviously more sense unless you're that kind of person. And that's the idea of rabbinical teachings. We are not trying to stomp people. When the Pharisees come, this is a group of people that Jesus knows back in those days. They have a very specific way of interpreting the text, of reading the text, of putting the comma in a specific way. And when the Pharisees come and they ask Jesus, whatever it is, they challenge Jesus. They want his understanding. They want to see where he puts the comma. And if I can convince Rabbi Chris that my way is more right than his way, then I become a great rabbi. And Jesus is considered a great rabbi. And we see this glimpses. We see glimpses of this. If you go back when Jesus is 12 years old, we have one of the only stories about Jesus as a child. He comes with his parents to Jerusalem. And this is where I love the text, the fine print. Because then it says, as their custom. And we already see that Jesus is being brought up into this world by a very devout family. If it's as their custom, that means they're doing this almost on a yearly basis, at least, if not more than that. Obviously, the closer you are to the city of Jerusalem, the easier it is for you to come more than once, right? You live in Bolivar 6 months. If I live in the Galilee, a week. I can do that 3 times a year, right? So when he's coming to the temple, he's going to be found at the temple asking the rabbis questions, and they are marveling at his responses, at his replies. Or they're asking him questions and they're marveling at his responses, I should say. So already at the age of 12, we see some of this greatness. He's showing them that he can put the comma in different places and give completely different meanings. And some of his teaching, by the way, are revolutionary. It took about 2,000 years for the Jewish world today to accept what Jesus was teaching them 2,000 years ago. They weren't ready back in those days. They had a different understanding. It made more sense to them. For 1,000 years, people have been telling them this is one of the only ways that, by the way, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. I don't know if you've ever heard that. We argue about everything. We'll argue with ourselves if we need to, because we love to argue. We need to know where to put the comma. And there were 2 main things that, believe it or not, the Jewish people agreed on. And one of them is the idea of God's authority. Where is God? God's at the temple. You want something from God? He can do it. But you have to go to the temple. You got to give the right sacrifice maybe. You have to come on the specific day maybe. You have to dress in a certain way maybe. And Jesus is telling them, no. God is omnipotent and there is no but after the word omnipotent. It's not God's omnipotent, but you have to go to him. God is omnipotent. God has authority, and that authority is everywhere. So if God wants to, I don't know, make an apple tree grow lemons, he'll snap his finger. You don't have to bring that tree to God. He'll send a cherubim, he'll send an angel, he'll whisper the word, and that apple tree will now grow lemons instead. God is everywhere. Everybody, you need to read the text, because there's a wonderful story in Luke chapter 7 where we're told about a centurion who has a sick servant, and Jesus is being prodded, he's being helped, he's being told, this guy deserves your help, even though he's not Jewish, he's a centurion, a Roman, the enemy, yet he still deserves you doing this because he has built us a synagogue. And by the way, when you come to Israel, I will show you that synagogue that centurion had built. It's still there, 2,000 years old, and it's still there. And Jesus is on his way to help this sick servant. And then more messengers come to Jesus and he tells them, or the messengers tell Jesus, don't trouble yourself. You don't need to come to the house. Say the word and the servant will be healed. And to this, Jesus is super excited. This is the only time in the text that Jesus is amazed in a positive way. Usually he's amazed at the unbelief. Now he's amazed at the understanding that this centurion is showing to what he's trying to teach. This centurion says, I got 100 soldiers under me. I tell somebody to do something, I know it gets done. That's what authority is. I don't need to go and see that the soldier did what I told him. And basically he's saying this is God's authority. God has authority on everything, and if he wants my servant to be healed, you don't need to come to my house. And when those messengers returned to the centurion, the servant was healed. And Jesus turns to those Israelites, those Jewish people who were following him, and he tells you, I have yet to find such great faith in all of Israel. That centurion, that non-Jew gets it. And later on, when Christianity becomes the Roman religion or the official religion of the Roman world, it goes like wildfire in the non-Jewish world. Why? Because the non-Jews don't have anything to compare it with. They don't have other rabbis telling them this is the way or this is the way or 1,000 different ways that we're going to read the text. All they have is Jesus' words. Nothing to compare it. I like to say that it's easier to fill a cup than to refill it, right? If you already have half a cup full and you want to somehow, while that water is still there, change it all into Mountain Dew. I like Mountain Dew, by the way. It's a lot more difficult than if the cup was empty to begin with. And that's what Jesus is battling. He's battling we're Jewish people are very stubborn. So he's battling a very stubborn group of people who have something to compare it with. And that's not easy. Okay, and these are some of the teachings that we go through, some of the cultural aspects that sometimes when we're reading the Bible, we don't look at it the same way as they did. Because while the Bible was written for you, I'm going to copy this saying, the Bible was written for you, it was definitely not written to you. It was written to an audience that Jesus, when he speaks to them, knows what he's speaking about. They know Roman law. They've already seen people getting, slapped in the face in the middle of the street for no reason whatsoever. So when Jesus is taking these examples, they don't need to fish out what's going on around here. They understand the culture. And by understanding the culture, what we're trying to do is just strengthen your understanding of your own religion. That's the entire idea. And hopefully this gives you a little bit of a glimpse into this very interesting world from 2,000 years ago.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Riff. We'll have a brand new episode every week, wherever you find podcasts.